roll call machine is open. All 9 council members are present. We have no executive session. Item 3, status report from the Executive Port Director at this time.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and members of the board. I am Sandy Sanders, Executive Director of Plaquemines Port, Harbor, and Terminal District. Follows is my Executive Director's report for the reporting period of 28 February to 28 March. During this time frame, I briefed members of the Naval Air Station Command staff on the status of a business plan we are preparing for the Navy regarding the joint use of the Navy's assets in an effort to introduce commercial air cargo delivery on the Joint Reserve Base Naval Air Station. I will brief the commander in April.
No, when I pray, I'm going to ad-lib.
I met with the principals of a company that specializes as a skilled service provider whose mission is to find, recruit, and train local labor for the companies such as Venture Global and Plaquemines Liquid Terminal that will be building into our area. We have stressed hire local, and this conversation is ongoing with them. I'd like to thank Representative Chris Leopold for introducing a bill on behalf of the port that would provide $500 additional money per month to our folks on the water, recognizing their skills of maritime security, force, and fire protection. This money comes directly from the state to the port and then to our employees. I'd like to tell our board to mark your calendars. On 18 April, the port will host a port night out at the Baby Cakes. We will be sending out invitations shortly to our tenants, our tariff-paying customers, customers of the port, business leaders, port administrators, port staff, and board members. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, I have 3 folks here that represent the port in Baton Rouge and Washington, D.C., that I have invited to provide an update to the board and the audience on matters before the state and nation impacting the maritime. First, Eric Sundstrom with Arlington Group, who is our lobbyist in Baton Rouge. Eric?
Thank you, Sandy. For the record, that's Eric Sundstrom with the Chesapeake Group. Represent the Plaquemines Port in Baton Rouge. Just to dovetail on what Sandy said, we were working with Representative Leopold. I believe y'all have a copy of that bill, which was sent the end of last week, House Bill 87. It will allow for an additional $500 per month for any qualified, what I call vessel worker, the guys on the water, that go through a fire training at the LSU Fire Training School. 2 of my biggest concerns as I lobby that bill is, number 1, as Sandy said, it comes directly from the state, so it's a roughly $200,000 state appropriation. And number 2, there are approximately 8 or 9 other ports that, if they pick up enough support, could amend themselves into that bill, which would kick that appropriation that much higher and end up sinking the bill. So Representative Leopold and I, along with, we do have 2 Senate co-sponsors, Senator Troy Carter and Senator Sharon Hewitt, will be working to keep that bill clean and hopefully bring back some extra money for the guys on the water. The last day for pre-filing of bills is tomorrow. I expect to get inundated between now and then. Should have a complete list for y'all. Session starts April 8th. I believe sometime that week should have a complete list of port bills and maybe some things with the parish. You know, a lot of times I tend to track what Representative Leopold does just because some of y'all are interested in what's going on with those pieces of legislation. So, again, if there's any questions, ask me now, or if you have anything during session, shoot me an email, give me a call, and I'd be happy to update you.
Mr. Roussel?
Yes, Mr. Sundstrom.
Yes, sir.
While I applaud Mr. Leopold's effort and your effort to do the supplemental pay, normally we would be requested to do a resolution in support of any bills that were filed on our behalf. Has that policy changed, or are you requesting a resolution from this body to support the legislation?
We discussed doing this back in, I think, August, when I had told the previous Port Commission that this was something that we were kicking around. And Representative Leopold just took it up and ran with it, and I worked with him on it along with the Port executive staff. I certainly think it would be good if this body did issue a resolution in support of it. Yes, sir.
Well, I guess the question, though, is more to the issue of the policy that the rep's going to follow. There's, you know, in the past when we've asked for legislation, he said he would file legislation, but we had to have a resolution. So I would appreciate it if you would clarify that with Tim to see if he's changed the policy or if we're going to continue with the policy, and if so, then we should get a resolution through the body to support the legislation.
Certainly. I can do that.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the table? Audience? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Yes, just a comment. I think we should open up with our Pledge of Allegiance and our prayer.
After we finish preliminaries, we will have the prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance to deal with business of the government. Any other comment?
Next, we have Senator David Bitter and Kyle Ruckert. They are our lobbyists in Washington, D.C. Senator.
Good afternoon to all of you. It's great to be here. And to the new board members in particular, congratulations. Or if the requisite number of months have passed, condolences, whatever is appropriate, but best wishes in any case. It's been Kyle and my real pleasure and honor to represent the port since September 2017. We have done that sort of in a joint arrangement with the parish, although right now there is a lapse in parish funding, but we're working with the new president and ultimately the council to find some funds, and hopefully that problem will be solved in the next few months. We also represent the Venice Port Complex, and we think that provides synergy too to represent all interests in this area, particularly port-related, in a very efficient and effective way. Just to give a few highlights of our work, I think in just a little over a year together, working very cooperatively together, we've scored some major victories at the federal level. Perhaps the biggest, we helped procure $12.9 million in supplemental funding from the Corps of Engineers for operation and maintenance dredging work in the lower Mississippi. That clearly affects the port and business activity in Plaquemines Parish. That is a very significant amount in the grand scheme of things in terms of what has been typical, and it will provide some much needed dredging funding for Tiger Pass, lower Mississippi, etc. Another big victory is we got Baptiste Colette, that project, authorized, fully authorized, and included in the last water resources bill that passed last year. That was the final step of a multi-step process. As you know, it's a painfully long process to get something like that authorized, first with the Corps of Engineers, then completely additional new hurdles at OMB. We helped walk it through all of that and got that project included in the so-called WRDA bill and fully authorized. We also worked with the port and the American Association of Port Authorities to secure $50 million nationally in donor and energy transfer port funding in the FY 2019 Energy and Water Development Appropriation. That's significant for Plaquemines because you participate in that program. That's a $10 million increase from the previous year, 25% increase. For Port of Plaquemines specifically, your share will be right around $1 million, so that will certainly be significant. Now let me turn to Kyle to mention some other highlights of our work.
Great, thank you, David. We've also, one of the things that was kind of dragging since Hurricane Katrina, we were able to work with the federal delegation to secure funds for the Port Sulphur Water Treatment Plant. This was an over $1.2 million in federal funding for the parish. We were also able to work with both Senator Kennedy and Senator Cassidy's office and the senators to send letters to Colonel Clancy and the Corps of Engineers in support of the liquefied terminal project. After some delay and some procrastinating from the Corps, NEPA, DEQ, and a few other federal agencies, we were able to work with the federal delegation, Whip Scalise, both of the senators, and applied pressure on the Federal Railroad Administration in particular to release a finding of no significant impact. It was for an environmental document that's able to move the LA-23 for the Gulf Coast Railway relocation project. We're also continuing to work with the delegation. We've had calls with Whip Scalise and the senators, most recently on moving forward on the Boothville Venice Community Center, as well as Fort Jackson, which continues to be an issue we work with, try to push FEMA to provide more money for the repairs. And then we're continuing to work with the delegation as well on some of the improper insurance reductions, in our opinion, that resulted from Hurricane Isaac. We're also working with the delegation regularly on the renewal of the National Flood Insurance Project, and we're aware of the particular concerns and priorities of several of the members that, in particular, as we kind of work on specific language on those documents. And then, as David mentioned, over the last year or so, we were able to, as members of the council and the port come to Washington, we've been able to get meetings with Senator Kennedy, Senator Cassidy, Whip Scalise, Congressman Graves, Congressman Mike Johnson from the North Louisiana, Congressman Higgins, Legislative Director from Acadiana and his service on the Homeland Security Committee. We've also had a couple of audiences with the Waterways Subcommittee, in particular the staff director over there, where we've worked closely on a number of these port issues. We've had federal delegation staff come to Plaquemines and tour, kind of learn more firsthand about the parish and everything that's going on here. And then we've been over to the Corps of Engineers, meeting with Ryan Fisher, the Deputy Assistant Secretary, and a number of other Corps officials, and as we've worked on a number of these projects.
I'll wrap it up. That's actually a great segue. Sandy and Paul have suggested that we organize a trip to Washington in the next few months to meet with delegation and perhaps Corps officials, particularly for the new members of the board. And we would love to set that up. Perhaps we can target May. Congress is in session pretty much all of May until the Memorial Day week, and we'd love to set up a productive set of meetings for any board members that would like to make that sort of visit. So we'll look forward to that. In general, we have provided regular updates to your professional staff and board members. But beyond regular updates, we're always eager to get calls, texts, requests for information. We respond to those very quickly. So we'd invite you to do that as the need arises. And I'll leave cards with all of you, which includes my personal cell number. So don't hesitate to use that, text or call. Sandy and Paul do that regularly as things come up, and I think they've found that we're very responsive. So we'll look forward to all of that. With that, Kyle and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the table? Mr. Roussel?
Hey, good morning or good afternoon now. On the NFIP bill, we have requested a language to be inserted in the bill on partial adoptions. Maxine's Water Committee has that in the bill. And do you know what the progress will be from this point forward as far as the bill?
We've certainly inquired into that, as you know, and been working specifically with Senator Kennedy's staff because his office is the most involved in that process. So I think we're absolutely in the mix with regard to that issue. The broader issue is if we're ever going to get a long-term reauthorization. As you know, it's been extended months at a time over and over and over. We've probably had 5 of those sorts of extensions, and we're still working with a lot of other folks around the country at a longer-term authorization, but we're certainly focused on that specific issue.
Just to wrap this up, we have a resolution that will be adopted hopefully today dealing with the issues that were addressed in the hearing and the issues that we support. So we'll be passing that today hopefully.
Great.
And forwarding on to the delegation as well as to the committee.
Great. That's terrific.
That's it, Mr. Roussel?
That's all.
Any other comments from the table? Audience? Anyone in the audience like to have a comment? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, subject to your questions or comments from you or the board, this concludes my report.
Comments from the board? The director? Comments? Audience? Any comments to the director? Hearing none, it concludes this report. At this time, since we're going into legislative acts, I'd like to come and say the prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. What's that?
For the prayer.
Prayer first, please.
Prayer first. Please bow your heads. We take this moment to acknowledge Almighty God and thank Him for our bountiful blessings, especially for the parish's natural resources. We give thanks to God for our brave and courageous men and women in our military who daily risk their lives to protect our precious freedom, and we pray for our world leaders to know how to obtain world peace. We pray that this government body, comprised of both the council and administration, will uphold their oath of office and serve our parish with honesty, humility, and equality to all. And as this government body gathers here today, we pray for the wisdom to know right from wrong and the courage to do that which is right, no matter who has called you or texted you or emailed you. Amen.
Mr. Stewart, Dr. Gould, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic
which stands one nation under God,
under God.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I just add one thing to the prayer? Just we want to keep Lieutenant Robin Thomas in our thoughts. As you see back there, we have Captain James Davis filling in for her. She had a medical issue that's going to keep her out for a month or so. So just if everyone can just take a second to give her a prayer and help her with a speedy recovery. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Business and advertisements, do you have any? Port, do you have any bids and advertisements? There aren't any, okay. 5, introduction of ordinance and resolution. I have none. Mr. Roussel?
None at this time.
I do. Oh. Go ahead. Trudy, do you have any? Ordinance. Culture? I have to sneak in over here. A resolution for establishing an accounting with Regions Bank for the payment in lieu of taxes and receipts, and otherwise to provide respect thereto. An ordinance to amend as amended and readopt the Plaquemine Parish Code of Ordinance, Chapter 2, Section 2-18, Rule for Transaction and Business before the Council as the sole governing authority of Plaquemine Parish, Port Harbor, and Terminal District Rule 19A, and otherwise to provide with respect thereto. Item 6A, going into final passage of ordinance and resolution. 6A. B.
There are none for 6A. B, a resolution adopting the amendments of the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District's Accounting Policies and Procedures Manual.
Mr. LaFrance?
I'm going to defer that item
Okay.
because I would like to make some changes on line 19 to 24, and I'm going to offer, I'll offer it later.
All right.
6C, a resolution authorizing and directing Maynard Sanders, Executive Director of the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District, to have the port's legal counsel file a petition seeking a final declaratory judgment from the appropriate court as to the legal source of the port's jurisdictional, organizational, and governance authority, and whether such source emanates from the Louisiana Constitution and LA, excuse me, RS 34:1351 et sec, or from the Plaquemines Parish Charter for Self-Government.
Commissioner Goode?
Offer is read and ask for a second.
Second, Councilman Black. Councilman Goode.
Thank you, sir. The 9 of us sit here, and we wear 2 hats. One hat, we act as the parish council, and we're elected by our constituents. The second hat we wear as the Board of Commissioners appointed by the state of Louisiana to govern a state public corporation, Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District. We're the same people. We're acting within 2 distinct and separate entities. On one hat, we're the port, and one hat, we're the parish council. The parish council and the port have an issue in regards to port governance and where that port governance comes from. Parish council is governed by the state constitution and the parish charter for local self-government. We all agree on that. The port is governed by the state constitution and not from the charter. We do not all agree on that. Hypothetically, if all of the council members were asked today, where do you stand on the port governance issue? The state constitution and statutes only, and not from any language in the charter that applies to governments. You'll get 3 answers. You'll get a yes, you'll get a no, and you'll get a not sure. And that is the issue. And as a council or a port board of commission, we have different views on that aspect of port governance. The solution is a declaratory judgment, a friendly lawsuit, if there is such a thing, that will result in a judicial ruling that will put this to rest. And we can move on. Whatever the final outcome, when it's done, we can move on. When we took our oath of office, we pledged to act in accord with the state constitution, its statutes, and our parish charter to the best of our abilities. When we were presented with a situation that was not in accord, we have a problem. My opinion, the parish charter does not give any governance to the port, and undoubtedly, we will be presented with a situation that will give us the conflict, and we cannot prevent that conflict until this issue is resolved. None of us can. I have a hard time understanding how anyone would choose not to vote for a declaratory judgment seeking to resolve this issue, no matter if you voted yes, no, or I'm not sure to the hypothetical question I mentioned earlier. Why are we going to avoid the obvious? It will recur and recur. We need to present both sides to the courts. One, that the charter does not dictate governance to the port, and two, that the charter does dictate governance to the port. We need to allow the courts to hear the arguments. We need an answer. Now, we may differ on the issue, but if we truly believe our conviction, if we believe we have a problem, if we believe we need resolution to the problem, and if we believe the problem will not go away until we do get resolution, then we should be unified, we should stand together, and put our convictions to the test so we can put this issue to rest. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to yield the floor, and I request that at the appropriate time, you allow me to make a closing statement before the question.
Any other comments from the table? Anyone? Mr. Russell?
Yes. To my colleagues in the public, we are not appointed by the state. We are elected by the people of Plaquemines Parish. The charter is very clear. We are not governed by the state. The council is the sole governing authority. So I offer my opinion on this declaratory lawsuit issue. My first thoughts are that we just completed an election cycle that revolved around the frivolous and nuisance lawsuit issues. The public spoke clearly. They were tired of these lawsuits. Here we are today voting to sue ourselves over an issue of whether the port should pay the council for time and expenses to do an internal audit. I thought we all agreed that the Plaquemines Parish Council is the sole governing authority of the port. The council has followed the charter, and it has done its job. I have not heard anyone other than the contract employees of the port raise this issue as being unconstitutional donation under Article 7 of the Louisiana Constitution. The ironic part of this discussion is that those employees feel so strongly about upholding the Constitution in this instance, but at least one of them completely ignored the Constitution by misusing the public credit card as reported in the same audit being cited in this effort to litigate. I believe suing ourselves to be a waste of the public funds, and a careful reading of the charter and state law proves that to me, and that is my position. And the other problem that I have is that the Business Association has lobbied this council very hard to sue ourselves. Having said that, this very port has their governmental director on the port's payroll for $100 an hour, and there's a direct conflict with the reporting in the local Plaquemines Gazette to get a fair shake to the public on what is really going on with this issue. And I firmly believe if that conflict would not be there and the reporting be fair and informative, that more people would be educated on this, and we wouldn't have to sue ourselves to get to the point of what Dr. Gouy just said we need to get to. But personally, I cannot vote to sue myself in this capacity that I sit today because I feel I know what the position is, and it'd be a waste of the taxpayers' dollars. Thank you.
Any other comments from the table?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. LaForce?
The Plaquemines Parish Port Harbor and Terminal District was consolidated into Plaquemines Parish Consolidated Government by virtue of the vote of the people and pursuant to the 1974 Louisiana Constitution, Article 4, Section 4 and 6. In Section 4 and Section 6, Section 4 says, every home rule charter or plan of government existing or adopting when this Constitution is adopted shall remain in effect and may be amended, modified, or repealed as provided therein, except as inconsistent with this Constitution. Each local government subdivision which has adopted such a home rule charter or plan of government shall retain the power, the function, and the duties in effect with this Constitution is adopted. If this charter permits, each of them shall also have the right to powers and function granted to the local government subdivisions. In Section 6, the legislature shall enact no law to effect of which changes or affect the structure and organization of the particular distribution and redistribution of the powers and function of any local government subdivision which operate underneath the Home Rule Charter. Now, does everybody have their charter? Can you go to page 22 under section 8.03, supersession clause? The charter shall give to the parish of Plaquemine the broadest power of local self-government possible under the section 3D as supplemented by section 3C of Article 14 of Louisiana Constitution of 1921 and section 4, 5, and 6 of the Article 6 of the Constitution of 1974. Accordingly, in cases of conflict between provision of this charter and ordinance adopted pursuant thereto, and any act of the state legislature dealing with parish government and to the other political subdivision and district, the provision of this charter right here, and the ordinance adopted hereunder shall prevail. So our charter shall prevail over the state. They gave us the power. And I yield.
Anyone else from the table? Audience?
Good afternoon, Council. Burgard Turner, 161 East Bellevue, Port Sulphur, Louisiana. I want to begin by congratulating Mr. Lapine on his win to the parish presidency. This is my first time coming before the council since he has been in office, and that we have this new council. I want to congratulate each of you for winning your race, and I'm trusting that the Lord will guide you and that you'll do a good job. This issue is very important, and I feel it to be grave to the success of the council in the port itself. So I'd like to address it. Mr. Gu, I just need your help just a minute to make sure I heard you correctly. You said the question is whether or not the state would rely only, our power, does it come from the state constitution only? Was that what you were, is that one of the questions? Or does it come from the state and the council? What was your question again?
That is the argument.
The argument is that it comes from the state.
One side says that the Constitution and statutes that created the port give us the guidelines and the dictates in regards to governance. The other side of the argument is that not only the Constitution and the statutes, but the Charter for Local Self-Government gives us dictates and guidelines for port governance.
Okay. Mr. LaFrance, I'm sorry. May I see your ordinance quickly? Because I don't have it in front of me. I'll make it quickly.
This one?
the reason I asked for the ordinance, because the question on the table, according to the ordinance, is, it's not in the preamble, but it's in the whereas on line 13 through 15, and the question is, seeking a final determination by the courts of competent jurisdiction, here's the question, declaring whether the port's jurisdictional, organizational, and governance authority emanates from the Louisiana Constitution and Louisiana Revised Statute 34-1351, or instead from the Plaquemines Parish Charter for self-governance. So the question that's on the table is whether or not the authority, and we acknowledge that the parish has the authority. I don't think anyone disagrees that the council is the sole governing authority of the port. Is that correct? So we agree that the authority, that the council currently has the authority. The question, according to the legislation, is where it emanates. Does it emanate from the state constitution, or does it come from the parish itself? Now, in my mind, right, I look at it as a person. If the parent is the state, and the port, the government, is the child. The parish didn't birth itself. The port didn't birth itself. It was birthed by the state. But once the Constitution, once we became a home rule charter, then we became an individual, autonomous, separate from the state. So the question of whether or not it emanates from the state, I find it to be irrelevant, because the fact is the parish now has the authority because of the home rule charter. If we want to rely solely on the state, let's go that route first. If we want to rely solely on the state constitution, as Mr. LaFrance read in Article 6, Section 4, any home rule charter that was in existence at the time of the 1974 Constitution, all of their powers remain. When you get to Article 6, the state legislature is not able to pass any law that would affect that change. That was one source. He quoted the source from the charter itself in the supersession clause, that if there's a conflict between the charter and the state, that our charter would prevail. There's another source I'd like for you to, I want to make reference to, and that's it's on the website for the police jury. And that site is www.lpgov.org, parish government structure. And in bold it says, 1974 constitutional change. The 1974 Constitution granted broad home rule authority to parishes and municipalities and reversed, check this out, this is key, and reversed the traditional concept of local government as a creature of the state possessing only delegated authority. It's fair to think and assume that all of our authority and power comes from the state. It's easy to see ourselves as creatures of the state, but the 1974 Constitution, Louisiana Constitution, reversed that. And even if it wouldn't have reversed it, in saying that all of the authority is delegated, handed down to us from the state, and we still have to rely on the state in Article 6, Section 4 says we're not changing anything. This Constitution does not change what was previously adopted. If you have a home rule charter, and we have a home rule charter, and we know that our home rule charter states that the council is the governing authority. So to ask the question where the power emanates from, I say, who cares? The reason I say that is because regardless of where it came from, we have it. So why would we spend taxpayers' money, dollars, to find out where it come from? Let's say it came from the state. I say, so what? Because the state is saying home rule charter still remains, and that the Constitution doesn't change it. So that's two areas. That was the charter itself that we can rely on, We can rely on the state constitution itself, 1974. We can rely on the police jury, on their report. Even in the master plan for the parish that was adopted, it states that we're under a home rule charter. Section 11 in the master plan on page 2, page 2 of 28, it says the 1966 Home Rule Charter set up a 5-member commission form of government. The 1974 Louisiana State Constitution granted local home rule authority to parishes, and here's the key word, and reversed the former Dillon Rule status that local governments were creatures of the state, possessing only powers delegated to them by the state legislature. Think about it. Even if we say it comes from the state, I say, so what? Because it has now been given over to you as our governmental leaders. And to want to turn it over to someone else or let someone else make a determination for us, I see it almost as a dereliction of duty, because we know that you are the governing authority. Each and every one of you know that. That's why you were elected, part of it. And so to turn that over to someone else and having a judge make a determination would be a dereliction of duty. We already know. And regardless of where it comes from, we have it. It doesn't change a thing. If we go to court and prove that it came from the state says the Home Rule Charter protects you and your powers doesn't change, and the state can't even pass anything to change it. With that, listen, I want to thank you for the time. And again, I'm presenting this with all due respect, not to offend anyone, but this is serious, right? And we shouldn't do anything to undermine or subvert this government. And there's a potential of undermining the authority of this government. And because of that, we should not support this legislation. Thank you.
Any other comments from the audience?
Yes, Warren Lawrence, 120 Timber Canal Lane, Myrtle Grove. First comment I would have is that the charter was adopted by vote of the people. If you want to change the charter, if you can't understand what it meant in the charter, then put the options not to a judge somewhere in Baton Rouge or something like that. Readdress the problem to the people and they may decide they don't want a port separated at all and it's going to be run by the parish president. Put the option with the people who created the charter. If it creates some ambiguity from you or something, let the people who approved it decide it. Don't go before some judge and have it decided. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Michelle Herbert, 108 Morning Glory Court, Belchase. I'm here on behalf of PABI, I'm 2019 PABI Chair. I have a letter that I'm going to read. We'll also provide Ms. Toops with a copy of the letter to distribute to all the council members. As the leading voice for the business community in Plaquemines Parish, PABI is extremely supportive of business and industrial development being proposed by the Plaquemines, Port Harbor, and Terminal District. Various elected members of Plaquemines Parish Council, who also serve as port commissioners, have offered differing views as to the role of the Plaquemines Parish Charter in the governance of the port. Everyone agrees the port is an agency of the state of Louisiana, established under the Constitution in 1954, and its governing authority is the Plaquemines Parish Council. But questions remain as to the authority of the charter in port operations. We believe that varying opinions and the underlying confusion puts the port in an unsettled position for council members, port administration, and businesses wanting to invest here. We believe all parties should work in a cooperative effort to obtain an opinion from the courts and settle the matter for the future benefit of all. While the laws regarding the port relative to the Constitution seem very clear, some interpret language in the charter as granting some authority to the government apart from the council. In other instances, council members have moved large amounts of money from the port to the parish without executing documentation in the form of a cooperative endeavor agreement, memorandum of understanding, or some other interagency transfer mechanism as required by law. There is clearly a difference of opinion amongst council members currently serving, and even more problematic is the difference of opinion every 4 years when new council members are elected. Recently, differences were explained to the Pobby Board by Port Attorney Ken Rathburn and Council Attorney Danny Garrett. An unsure and unresolved issue such as this will continue to cause uncertainty and could be very costly from the standpoint of outside lawsuits and decisions not to invest. When a consensus cannot be achieved, the courts are often called upon to settle differences. This does not always mean a costly, contentious battle. It can be done with in-house counsel. We believe the matter should be resolved for the future of the parish and the port, with all sides working together. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councilman Good.
I appreciate all the comments, and I truly respect everyone's opinion. Great arguments were made. We heard a lot of readings from the Constitution, from the Charter, citing certain different sites. We heard what some members of the audience had to say. And what comes to mind for me, in light of the fact that there are strong convictions by members of this council for and against the declaratory judgment, there are also strong opinions as to which side is right. The courage to stand up to your convictions when we as an organization need some guidance reminds me of what a friend told me the other day, and it was a very wise comment. He told me that people smarter than us are going to have to tell us what to do. The court system is set up for that. The declaratory judgment, which is a way of resolving an issue, is what's being proposed. And I ask all of you council members, as council members and as port commissioners, to vote your conscience. I've heard it said many times, we got to put an end to this. It's got to go away. We got to find some resolution. Well, here's what I'm offering. And Mr. Chairman, with that, I'll call the question.
Question has been called. Five yeas, 2 abstention, and 2 no votes.
Hold on, I wanted to vote no.
Well, it doesn't matter to me. So it passes. You want to reconsider? You want a new vote? You want to reconsider your vote? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, I wanted to vote no. How you vote on these things? Okay.
We're going to reconsider. Can you document that he's voting no instead of abstention? All right, it's passed, 5-4. 2 noes and 3 noes and 1 abstention. Next item, please.
6D, an ordinance to amend and as amended readopt Rule 1 in Chapter 1 of Section 2-18 of the Code of Ordinances for Plaquemines Parish relative to the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District and otherwise provide with respect thereto.
Mr. Roussel.
I'll offer this filed.
Is there a second? Second, Councilman Black. Mr. Roussel.
Yes, as you know, at the last meeting, we decided that the Port Committee was no longer needed, And what this does is calls for a second meeting of every month for the port to meet on a regular basis. So we're going from 1 meeting a month of the full body to 2 meetings a month for the full body.
Any questions from the table? Audience?
From the staff, we recommend approval as well. We believe this will provide more efficiencies.
Tell them who you are. Get to the mic. You got to tell them who you are.
I'm sorry, Paul Matthews, Deputy Port Director. We agree with and recommend approval for this, and that is going to create a lot of efficiencies for the staff and the board working together. Just one little tidbit from a communication standpoint, as we go to 2 meetings a month, what I ask from the board is that we look into changing a rule, and that when an item is introduced, that the staff is allowed to provide reason of why we're introducing the item. Because if we have everyone at the table already, we can provide information, and then maybe either questions or just information is provided, so that 2 weeks from now, we'll probably be ready to vote and move forward with the resolutions or ordinance.
Any other comments? Machine is open. Passes 9-0.
Number 7, new business. There are no items or introductions of resolutions wherein suspension is being sought. 7B, presentation by D.C. lobbyist David Vitter and Mercury Affairs. We've already done that. C, Port Financial Report.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, per the external audit from last year, it was mentioned that at every board meeting we need to provide financial information. So what we're asking is that the budget report or financial report, however you want to call it, be put in permanently into the agenda, and we'll have the comptroller, Ms. Chambrell Riley-Williams, provide any highlights, and then if there's questions from the board, there may be questions. With this initial report, we provided it last Friday, and we asked for questions or concerns on Tuesday so we could be prepared to answer those today, and we'll do that for every meeting. Ms. Chambrell?
Any other? Go ahead.
No, I did not receive any questions, so I don't have much to report on.
Any comments from the table? Audience?
Well, I have one comment.
Mr. Roussel?
This is going to be a monthly report?
Yes, it's based on the agreed upon procedures by the state legislator that there be a financial review presented monthly to the board. So what I'll do is the week before the meeting, I will send out a budget performance. You know, we get some bills in late and early and all of that. So I sent over the details. So if you have a question on a specific line item or a specific expense, that I would have time to get those details and we discuss it here at the meeting. I just ask that the questions get to me a little bit ahead of time.
One more thing, we started this process prior to the external audits report in late 2017, in which we had a committee. We provided the financial reports to the committee, but we also emailed it to the entire board. So once the external audit report came out, they asked us to put it into the actual regular meetings as opposed to the committee meetings. So it was something that we implemented already, but now we're just changing the procedure, and this is systematic of other ports in the state as well, that they have to follow through with this process.
And the reason I asked that, because in my readings to prepare for this meeting, I looked at all the revised statutes, and under RS 34:1365, there's also an annual report that's due, that showing all receipts, disbursements of the district, the number of arrivals and departures of vessels and their tonnage, the export and imports passing through the district, and setting forth the general condition of the district and its buildings. Are you prepared to do that for the end of the year, or are you going to get prepared? Because I haven't seen an annual report like that being produced. You said you're under the state laws. Well, this is the state law. So I'm bringing it to your attention.
Well, I'm glad you agree we're under the state laws. So, yeah, we'll work with that, and we'll work with you on it. And I'm so glad to hear that you believe that we're under the state laws. So thank you, Mr. Roussel. I appreciate it.
Just for clarification, since you like to twist my words on a constant basis, I want to also say that you're under the charter as well as this whole governing authority. So if you want to keep battling back and forth, that's fine. All I'm doing is pointing out RS 34 Code 1365 to you and ask you to comply with the state law. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any more comments?
It's funny already.
Next item.
Number 8, approval of the February 28, 2019 meeting minutes.
Is there an offer? Machine is open. Any comments from the table?
Second.
Audience, machine is open. Passes 9-0. I have a motion to adjourn. Councilman Goode, offered, and seconded by Councilman Alford.
Vote.
For the meeting
Vote.
adjourned.
You have to vote.
Yeah. So the machine is open. Machine is open. The meeting has been adjourned with a 9-0 vote. At this time, the minute is completed. We will have a 5 minutes.
Did we adopt the minutes?
Yeah.
159.
It's 1:59. We will have a recess for 5 minutes before the council take off.